Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Wednesday, January 7th. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris, Jed Lowry here with you. On this episode, we dig into a question. We love numbers, but what are we missing? It is inspired by a piece that Eno wrote with Will Salmon earlier this week. We figured having Jed here with us, we'd get some good perspective on things that us nerds who've been on the outside may have overlooked. There's some great stuff in that story from Tommy Phams. We'll dig into all that in just a few minutes. Jed, how's it going for you on this Wednesday?
It's going well, guys. I'm happy to be back. 2026. Weird to say.
Another one of those fake years that we're living in. What's up?
Fake years.
All right.
Yeah, you're all right. You're good.
Doing good. Today was a hard morning because there's something about
heat.
like
bringing the heat.
The first morning when you wake up after vacation is hard, but you knew it was going to be hard, and you get up and you do it. And then there's something about like second and third morning, you're like, oh, this is just now the new normal. You know, today was hard.
Back to
both
reality.
Boys really did not want to get out of bed this morning. They just
school's back. Yeah. You had the buffer day on Monday where your kids didn't have to go to school, but now they're back at it.
Today there was the realization hit in that this is the new norm, and they didn't like it, and they were both borderline late today, we'll say.
Well, on to some better things, hopefully, but well, not actually at first. I was reading some stories on The Athletic this morning, just getting caught up on the news.
Yeah, this is not better.
Evan Drellick and Katie Wu had a story about the financial troubles of Main Street Sports Group. They operate FanDuel Sports Network. They have the rights to teams in actually a bunch of major sports leagues, 29 partner teams, counting the MLB teams, NBA teams, NHL teams, 9 in Major League Baseball, though, including the Braves, Reds, Tigers, Royals, Angels, Marlins, Brewers, Cardinals, and Rays. And you might think to yourself, well, other than maybe having a hard time finding the game or going month to month or having some sort of inconvenience when the season starts, why do I care about this? If you think about the teams on that list, and I'll say them again, Braves, Reds, Tigers, Royals, Angels, Marlins, Brewers, Cardinals, Rays, there's a common thread there. Other than the Braves, they haven't spent anything this offseason. Those have been very, very quiet teams. And as the story highlights, there was one GM who was granted anonymity to speak candidly about the efforts. You don't know what your income is, and it does make a difference. In this instance, guys, I actually believe it. Because the uncertainty, especially with TV money, has, I think, a very, very strong link to what ownership groups are comfortable spending on big league payrolls. So is it fair for me to sit here and say, yeah, that actually probably explains a lot about why those 9 teams have been so quiet spending-wise so far this winter?
I mean, I think you spend your fixed income. You spend your fixed income, and the variable income on top of that is profit. I mean, I think that's basically how they work. They don't want to spend anything that they don't have, linked up. I mean, this is as stupid as like when I used to do educational publishing, when we made workbooks, we basically, our first print run was all bought. Like we would make sure our first print run, Barnes & Noble bought, 60% of it, and Borders bought 30% of it. Like we had it down to like 90% of the first print run is bought. And then you can do another print run when you start selling inventory. So that's the idea here, is that you basically have your money coming in from MLB, from the licensing. You get the money from the national TV deals. You get money from the local TV deals. You want everything to be based on that. And then basically anybody who comes to the stadium and buys something from you that's the profit.
Well, and I mean, you got to think like, I assume we're talking just about player salaries too, right? There's a whole infrastructure with non-player salaries that they have to account for as well, that continues to grow, right? The analytical arm race that is happening, the amount of spending that happens in the front office and back office to support the product on the field, that spending is through the roof too. So I assume, you're just talking about the players' salary.
No, I think you just basically as many of your costs as you can defray basically with fixed income. You don't want to be sitting there. I mean, maybe they say, okay, we can rely on 1 million people to come. Even if we're terrible, 1 million people will come. Maybe they do something like that. but like they don't, everything wants to be fixed. And when you're like, oops, I don't know what this TV number is, then they don't like uncertainty, just basically. And
of course, like what business, like it's hard to operate. It's hard to project any sort of future value, or, when you don't know, when those costs are completely unknown. I mean, that is a basic tenet. And you look at the Braves, and the Braves are the outlier for one reason and one reason alone, because of the battery, right? They're
maybe
corporate
owner too, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, publicly traded, right? So like,
but I mean, but in that regard, like they're almost more beholden to spend within their means, right? Because if you're a private company and ownership wants to spend, they have that right to spend. If you go out as a publicly traded company and spend beyond your means, and there's a different level of accountability when you're publicly traded. And the amount of money that the Braves are making is public, and that the battery shows what a successful business model that is. They've got, even though these RSNs, which even more alarming, because I think this group is the group that was formed after the Diamond Sports Group filed for bankruptcy. And that was only 2-3 years ago.
Yeah. Diamond Sports, that wasn't that long ago.
That's maybe the most worrisome part of this for me, is that, there's something broken in that model. We just don't have, I think what happened with cable is that a lot of people who didn't watch baseball still paid for it, basically. Because, cable forced you to take 300 channels, and, oh, by the way, $1 every month that you're spending goes to, the Comcast local channel. And, even if you don't ever watch it, it's part of your sports package or whatever. So the problem with streaming is now you need to extract more money from the people who actually want to watch you. And that's why there's if there's any hope, it's what Manfred is trying to do, which is try to get as many of the team's rights on like into MLB, like to have, so that MLB owns the team's broadcast rights for locally, have as many of those on the table in 2028, I believe is the year he wants them all on the table, so that he can sell those individually, even individual games, sell them chop them up however he can to get them right into streaming, right to the people who want them, and get the most money out of them. It does make it tough to be a fan. I read somewhere that if you were a New York sports fan and you like the Yankees and the Knicks, that you're spending like, I don't know, $300-400 a year to watch
the broadcast. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because you have to have some access to Yes. Right. Mm-hmm. Like for the Yankees, you have to have Prime because they get some Yankees games, and you got to get Apple TV because it's split up over so many places. That's to watch every single regular season game. But I think most people say it's 162 games, and as long as I'm watching 100 games or 120 games, that's enough. You opt out of some of the services
per game, basically. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, there's also, I think I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure there's still blackouts in all of those contracts for the regional sports networks, and so you're kind of limiting the viewership based on trying to get people to buy tickets. And ultimately, that I just don't like, more eyes is better.
Oh, 100%. And the blackout concepts are just so outdated. And I just can't believe we're still operating with any of those in place here in 2026. Of course, Major League Baseball's taken over the broadcast for a bunch of teams that have kind of fallen out of these RSN deals in recent years. That group of teams will probably increase in light of this news. And eventually in 2027, the teams that MLB is currently managing the broadcast for will end up on ESPN streaming service, which will probably help the situation. Maybe help the situation. It feels better than everything being chopped up into individual deals as they currently are. But that mess continues. If you were wondering what's going on with the RSNs, they are not.
Manfred has said, by the way, publicly that part of the national 2028 plan is to eliminate blackouts.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is something that he's talked about wanting to eliminate. And I hope there are people, I think it's Idaho or like parts of Illinois that like They're just like blocked out of everybody.
One of the I states. I think it's Iowa, actually. I think Iowa.
Yeah.
There's multiple teams that claim certain states that don't have a team as their local market, and they get blacked out of 4+ teams. Vegas for a long time, I think, was one of those great triangles where it's like, oh no, we're A's territory, we're D-backs territory, and then you can't watch a bunch of teams, and you give a night, you might lose 5 or 6 games from the slate, which is not good if you're just a fan of hopping around and watching games.
I do have some confidence though in just like capitalism and like the MLB to like figure out how to extract more money from our pockets and like keep going. There's some part of this where I'm like, they'll figure it out, like they'll make it work. But
I mean,
it's definitely a problem.
Yeah, the business relies on it, right? Like the more eyes, the better. And so the more eyes we can get on the game, the better it is for the overall health, both now and in the future.
But following that sometimes leads to just like the most annoying things as a fan. I mean, the Apple games and then the Peacock games, and like it's just like.
Well, I mean, I think it is very cobbled together right now, seemingly, like kind of to DVR's point, right? Like you've got a bunch of different things, and I think they're trying to do the best with what they have, right? And this group takes Diamond Sports Groups or some of the assets out of Diamond Sports Groups and cobbles that together.
Yeah, like
it doesn't work, and so they're
gonna sell to the zone maybe, but is the zone gonna do any better? Like it's that whole model is there's a mess up there somehow. I don't know.
Yeah,
it doesn't work for anybody else, but maybe it'll work for us.
Yeah, right. Here's a fun little side thing though. As we get more setups, in these, so like NBC is taking some games, and as each of these. We get more broadcast boosts. We get more shots at greatness. So there's some talk that it's Clayton Kershaw and maybe Joey Votto on NBC this year. So
is that going to be the Manning cast for MLB?
I don't know. But like
the Votto Kirsch.
I think that has
how much those guys they might have some pretty differing opinions on a lot of things.
I know. I think that's a pretty intriguing. My dream was like me, Votto, and Greinke.
That would be entertaining.
Yeah, that would be really entertaining.
That would be very entertaining.
I don't know if Greinke wants to do so. Yeah, that's part of the problem.
I wonder what the distribution of just words said would be in that trio.
Right. Yeah. Greinke,
if you, Votto, and Greinke, what do you think the word count would be?
You would be carrying a lot of water on that one.
Yeah. Right. 60%. There would be 30% Votto.
Just a lot of searing burns from Greinke just interspersed. I wouldn't say a lot, but it'd be very impactful, I think, when he got some words in.
Yes, I mean he would be firing up the oven to 1,000 degrees, like getting the brand nice and hot, and when it did come in, that thing would be searing.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, let's get to our big picture question for today. I really like the story that and Will Salmon wrote on The Athletic earlier this week. I think people were loving the Pham graphs moniker that came out of it, because Tommy Pham has some pretty strong opinions and ideas about things that the numbers are missing. Before we get to the story, which a lot of people who listen to the show and watch the show have probably read already, I wanted to throw the question to Jed. Like, what do you feel we're missing? Because you dig through Savant and Fangraphs and Baseball Reference and the things that Eno and I and our listeners and viewers are thinking about and digging into all the time. And as you kind of look through the lens now, working from the outside, like, what do you feel like we as the collective group of nerds are actually missing in the numbers at our disposal?
Yeah. So I think the park factor thing, and I love that we're starting to talk about wind, and we're starting to talk about and the different wind within the stadiums. And I remember, playing in Oakland for as long as I did, you'd have those two little alleys kind of in right center and left center where, you'd see the flags. And I knew as a player that in right field, if that flag was blowing out to right field, I knew that everything was actually blowing in. because the way that the wind patterns worked was it would come over the top of the stadium, and in that little alley that allowed the wind to go out where the flag was, everything else was whipping through the stadium and coming right back. And I started seeing some of the graphs of the weight of the wind patterns at different levels, which now we're starting to see. That, like I said, I think the wind, it's not as generic of just putting a wind, weather vane or whatever at the top of the stadium and being able to determine where the wind is actually blowing. There's so many different layers within a stadium, the seating, the bowl, all of that affects the actual outcomes. And I was, since Tommy, I don't like talking about myself a lot, but since we're talking about FAM graphs or whatever it was, I just look at my expected home runs from on Baseball Savant from 2016 to 2022. I hit 56 home runs. If I'm playing in Baltimore, I've got 22 more home runs, right? Based on those park factors. And that's, and I don't even think that considers wind. So, I think there's a lot more factors to be played, and I know they try to adjust it for park with the OPS plus and WRC plus, but it's just not, to me, it's not an overall picture yet. So I think there's more park factors that go into these numbers.
What you're talking about real quick, like we worked together on a piece where we tried to account for, exit velocity, launch angle, and basically create an expected distance for every ball, and then look at difference between expected distance and actual distance. And we posited that the difference between those was wind. And we kind of did a heat map of the outfield in Oakland, and we did find some markers where you were talking about where the sort of wind alleys were. We found some places where there were actually places in Oakland where you could get above average distance, but you had to catch. It was like where those flags were down was it the right field line where there's
left field line,
the left field. There's no grandstand or something.
Yeah.
There was little parts where if you caught the wind there, you were fine. But then there was Mount Davis that just destroyed everything.
And I picked like I said, this is I'm just taking my personal experience on this. I'm looking across. I picked the first one, right, with Baltimore. You go down to Cincinnati and Milwaukee. I hit 14 home runs in 2021. If I'm playing in Cincinnati, those 14 home runs in Oakland turn into 30 in Cincinnati, just on the distance alone. 26 in Milwaukee. So that's what I'm saying. There's just the difference between a 14 home run player and a 30 home run player. Houston, I'm hit. So that's 95. So I hit 56 from 2016 to 2022. If I'm playing, this is just, Baseball Savant, I hit 95 home runs playing in Cincinnati.
In Cincinnati, geez.
That's a 39 additional home runs over 5 years. It's a different player.
Yeah. I do think the funny thing about it is that from an analyst perspective, from a front office perspective, they're washing the numbers accordingly. Like it's not like Eno's talked about this more recently with pitchers going to the Giants and reaping the benefits of the ballpark, Patrick Bailey, right? Like all those factors that come into play. A team's not going to look at Jed in Cincinnati and go, those 30 homers, also let's bring him to the Giants. He's going to hit 30 home runs at Oracle. Like teams are obviously far, far into the ability to discern and understand that. Grew up in an era where that wasn't fully understood. It hasn't been understood for that long. I mean, as a kid, I swear the Brewers did not understand the Coors effect. They brought in Jeffrey Hammonds on this big free agent deal and were disappointed that he wasn't the same guy in Milwaukee that he was in Colorado, right? So we're only 20-ish years away from maybe 25 or 30 now from teams just not even realizing how extreme some of those differences could be.
We have fans still, and the fans still, have a different understanding of all of this. And, I think that still drives how players are considered.
But
I'm not sure that I think teams will be able to sort of get to a true talent of a player. Yes. But I think that there's still an effect, there's still an effect of people beyond that.
Certainly. I mean, from all-star voting to Hall of Fame voting, like the numbers still matter. Right.
Mhm.
And, you know, I think, you know, what you're saying is from like an evaluation and a contract, you know, perspective and DVR, of how much a player is going to make or what their value is. I mean, just look at one of the more recent examples. You know, Pete Alonso has hit 269 home runs from 2019 to 2025. The team he just signed with, Baltimore, he actually has 4 fewer home runs according to the Park Factor playing in Baltimore. So, you know, he still got handsomely rewarded, which he should be, right? I'm not making the argument that he shouldn't be. I'm just saying that if I'm Baltimore, you know, and you're saying like they take this into consideration, how do they end up being the top bidder for a player that in their ballpark hit fewer home runs than he did in a place that he just came from?
Yeah. And you know, there's also like, so one of the things I think about when Tommy Pham talks about this is like, he's like, okay, so we've established that wind matters and we know that wind matters. Mm-hmm. And we have something like wind applied metrics. Ken Arson, he's told us before that like that tidbit that we had that the record for wind aided homers in the past was 19 in Citi Field in 2023. And that this year Sacramento had 56 wind-aided homers. So they are able to take a certain amount of measurements, put it into their model. Their model models how wind moves through space. And that creates an idea of like, so they can absolutely tell you right now. Ken actually went on Blue Sky and said, because I said in the article, like this could be theoretically, you could take every fly ball and tell how much wind has changed it. And he goes, not theoretically, we can do that right now. Like we have how much wind affects every fly ball. And then it was very interesting. Barton Smith, who was I would say the discoverer of seam shifted wake, you know, the came in and said, well, you guys have like basically 2 measurements in a model. And so this goes back to what Jed was saying, like when people build a skyscraper, they actually will go and take measurements like every 10 feet, you know, around where they are and take actual measurements and use a model. So they'll put these 2 things together to get to a level of precision that they need to build something that won't fall down. Right. So, you know, what we're at right now is the beginning of wind measurement. And, you know, one thing that Tom Tango, the data scientist at MLBAM was saying was that, you know, the wind will change a little bit during a play. Mm-hmm. Like you'll see balls kind of move this way and that during a play being changed. So how do you represent that? Do you trust the model? The model will tell you, it models a little bit closer to prevailing wind. It's sort of like, this is how things should be going. It's not actually telling you on a single play, oh, the wind was going this way and then suddenly shifted, because you've seen guys do infield pop-ups. So they're walking one way and then all of a sudden they're walking the other way, you know? So like,
and Oakland and the Coliseum more than any other place.
Really?
Oh my God. I mean, we could probably put a 30-minute highlight of, you know, people both dropping and catching pop-ups where they start out one way and they're sprinting the other to go catch it or having it drop.
Right. Cause you're off the bat, you're reading spin and like launch angle and like that sort of stuff. And then, so you're kind of their first move defensively is towards where you think just without wind almost, right? You're like, okay, that is going that direction, that. And then your secondary move is, oh, the wind is taking it this way.
Yeah. I mean, the first move is like off the bat. And then it's all of the, you know, it's like the Rolodex of like, where am I playing, the experience of being in that stadium. But then to your point, like different layers, you kind of have to follow the ball up to like see where it's going, because the different layers have different winds. And so you're using as a player
over the grandstand, it'll hit the jet stream or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so you're kind of following this as it goes up, and based on like, you know, generally speaking, the ball will come back to the lines, right? So if you're on the foul side of the line, it'll come back to the line. If you're on the foul or the fair side,
because
it'll
of
continue
batted
to
ball
go.
spin, which is another thing we don't have
because of batted ball spin. Exactly.
We don't
because
have
of
that
batted ball
publicly.
spin. And then
Yeah.
from there, you have to take into consideration the wind.
Yeah. So I think we're like, what's fun about what Tommy's talking about is like, we're a little bit closer to being able to do this, but there's still going to be different generations of how well we can do this. Like we're talking about, we could do the wind applied metrics right now, but would it be better if we had actual little measurements at every little part in the park? And is that possible? Maybe it is possible, because teams will say, man, it'd be better if I knew exactly how many home runs Jed would have hit last year, because I'm about to sign him. And if I had wind, for everything and batted ball spin for everything, I could say this is his expected home runs, and I could say it with certainty.
Yeah, on each batted ball, right? Like what was the wind actually what was it happening? And then I think it's worth talking about the other point where, if we're done on the wind, when he's talking about the competition, I thought that was an interesting point too. And I have some thoughts, but I'm curious, what especially working with Tommy, what you thought about that aspect of his.
We're pretty far along in this. He was talking about when you're playing on the Pirates, it's a pitcher friendly park. We have a good pitching staff, and we don't, we struggle to score runs. We're losing close games. They bring in their closers, their best relievers, and so I'm seeing great pitching. And so I looked and I found that the Pirates, did have the highest leverage index in the sport last year. So they were playing the tightest games in the sport last year. So there was some truth to that. But this again, and we've had, so apparently I didn't know this, but OPS Plus has quality of competition in it. We've had people going back forever that have done this. DRC Plus on Baseball Prospectus has quality of competition in it. The problem is that for a lot of people, a lot of it goes out of the wash. So, Craig Goldstein, the BP, went through and he looked at it from the lens of their model. And he said that Tommy actually faced almost exactly league average competition with pitching over the course of the year. Kyle Bland over there at Pitcher List, he looked at it through their lens. Their lens includes like a Stuff Plus, their own version of Stuff Plus. And what he found was that Tommy Pham did see tougher pitchers on average over the course of the season. So this is again, what my point is that we make these decisions about what goes into our models, and then each of the things that we put in has a different level of precision in it. And that level of precision can get better over time. And the number of things we put into our models can get better as we measure more things. But there's always going to be, can we make this better? Because maybe Craig Goldstein's they have stuff over there. Maybe, if he looked at it from a DRA standpoint, does that include Stuff Plus yet? So, there's a question of what you're throwing in, how precise those things are. You're throwing in the wind measurement. Is it 2 measurements in a model, or is it a million measurements? That sort of stuff. Yeah. So, when you do adjust for quality of opposition, you are going to add a little bit of noise, because now you're doing two things. You're trying to say, how good is Jed? And then you're trying to say, how good is the pitcher that is throwing to Jed? And so that means that I've now introduced a little bit of noise, because now I need to know how good the other guy is too. And then I need to remove that from Jed. And so, I think that's why WRC Plus does not have it in it. It just says, this is what happened.
And I agree. I think some of it is noise. I think, I sympathize with Tommy, especially playing on a team with a bad offense and a good pitching staff, because I think I would describe it as statistically insignificant, but psychologically significant, right? And the thing that kept popping into my mind, because I wanted you to talk about it first, because you kept saying over the course of the season, right? And why I say it's psychologically significant is because, yes, 500, 600, 700 plate appearances, but it's 4 a night. And if you are grinding every single one of those at bats against the best pitchers of the league, night in and night out, that is exhausting. And so that's why I say it's psychologically significant. The hardest thing to do as a professional is to compartmentalize those 4 at bats, right? Because you're living and dying, especially as a young player, on those 4 at bats, night in and night out. You don't have the perspective of a full season and what it means to kind of go through the ups and the downs. And so it's really hard to learn as a player how to compartmentalize those 4 at bats or 4 plate appearances every night, because whether you go 0 for 4 or whether you go 4 for 4, you got to show up the next day and do it again. And so it's when you are on a team that is offensively bad and your pitching is good, so you're playing these close games. I guess you could say the other way, you have really good offense and a really bad pitching staff, right? A's are a team that I look at last year, right? That like scored a ton of runs but gave up more. So even though they are scoring a lot more runs than the Pirates, they're still in close games, right? And so I think it's the
psychologically their situation is different because they're like, we can score runs, like we can do this.
I would still no, but like you're feeling more confident about it because you're scoring more runs, right? But that kind of just goes back to the base level talent, quite frankly, right? Like I think a lot of people would argue, even though Sacramento is a great place to hit, I think the majority of the league, I don't know who would make the argument that the A's aren't more talented offensively than the Pirates, right? And so I think that it goes just back to the fact that, like, there is a layer of just baseline talent, and I think a lot of that is noise, to your point, and I would say that psychologically it's more significant, like I said, because you're grinding every single at bat and you're just, quite frankly, not a very good offensive team.
And to your point about the shape of a season, when Kyle Bland showed the quality of his opposition over the course of the season, the way he put it was Tommy saw a ridiculously amount of great pitches early in the season. And over time it regressed. And this is why you're saying, like, over the course of 600 or 700 plate appearances, it usually evens out. And even for Tommy, it evened out. But what does he remember of the season? What does the season feel like to him? It feels like a grind the whole way through.
Just exhausted, right? Like, especially when you get, like, if you start out like that first half and you're playing a bunch of close games and every single 4th plate appearance you have is against the high leverage guys, it's exhausting. Mentally, it's exhausting.
Yeah, you're going to see one of the 3 best relievers in the bullpen by that point in the game for that last plate appearance. That's what he said. He's like, you're 1 for 3 and you're waiting for that 4th plate appearance, and it's going to be against someone who's completely nasty. So you're probably going 1 for 4.
As opposed to like Randy Arozarena trying to make a double off of the position player, But another thing, the side thing that just came. This started multiple interesting conversations because Tango started talking about this, and other people wanted to weigh in, and so it was an interesting day on social media. But one of the side things that Tommy brought up in a conversation with Tango was gaming the stats. And I've had conversations with players where, they specifically want to ask me, like, what's in this? How is this measured? Tommy has this big thing about how he hates sprint speed because, he says that, he doesn't want to sprint all out every time. And he thinks that sprint speed will dock him. And he said, if you just took my actual best max sprint speed and put me up against people, I would look a lot better than I look in the sprint speed metric, right? And one of the things that came up was Tommy said, well, infielders talk about this all the time, a way to game outs above average. And he said that a way to game outs above average on the infield is to stand as far back as you can, take the ball as far back as you can, and throw as hard as you can to first. Because by taking the ball further back, you make the play seem harder, and then your
arm strength. Your arm strength throws up high. Sure, yeah.
Yeah, because you even asked me before the show, how's arm strength? And arm strength is your top 5% of throws averaged. So like if you did this on average where you took the ball further and threw harder, your top 5% would look better because you'd have more max throws in there. full max throws. So I've had this when UZR didn't used to have foul balls in it. People asked me about that, and I said, yeah, there's no foul balls in UZR. So, people were like, ooh, I should play further off the line. And so there are these interesting things where we have these metrics that are from the state, like MLB metrics that are out there for everyone to see. And players wanting to know how those things are measured so that they can actually game them to some extent. I don't know. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I've had enough of these conversations where I'm like, I'm pretty sure this happens. So like, I don't know how to throw this to you, Jed, but does, what comes to mind when I talk about it that way?
I don't know. I mean, I just, like I said, I think there's enough room and players are incentivized enough to try to game the system, right? Like if you can game the system, if you can add, one defensive run saved and it takes you from a below average, or two defensive runs saved, it takes you from below average to average. We've talked about on the show.
Your whole market changes, right?
Cedric Mullins, like, if he goes from a below average center fielder to an average center fielder, his market changes. So the incentive, and does it really affect the outcomes of the game or help the team win? I'm not sure, but it makes him look better and it changes his market.
There's also another thing that Tommy came up with that is interesting about teammates is he was talking about people calling people off. I could see this is where the line between Tommy a good teammate or a bad teammate comes up, I think, because there's a very big perception he's not a good teammate. And there's a lot of teammates that I know that have enjoyed his presence. But when it comes to like my metrics versus your metrics and you calling me off and hurting my defensive run saved or whatever, that is an interesting thing about my just overarching. That's the reason. One of the reasons I love baseball is that it's like an individual sport wrapped in a team sport. And there's like all these moments where, you have this individual matchup that's at the heart of it, pitcher versus catcher, but you also have, in these metric ideas, like you have this moment where a left fielder, like, the Pages in the World Series, Pages like running over Kike, like that may not have happened in the regular season. I feel like.
Well, it's funny. I equate it. I'm a big Blazer fan, and I'm watching like a center like Donovan Clingan, right? His first couple years, he was a little bit more, he wasn't as aggressive going to getting rebounds, right? But now he's like fighting off his own teammates
for the boards.
to get the rebounds. Exactly.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? So like, Denny Advia is down there, like, he's like ready to get a rebound and Donovan's like jumping over him to grab the rebound because Denny's not getting paid to rebound, right? Like
that's right. Yeah.
Donovan is getting paid to rebound.
Yeah. You get paid for assists, little man. Give me the board.
No, Denny is not a little man.
I know he's not that little.
Bull in a china shop, but Donovan very much is there to get the rebounds.
But they have also found analytically in basketball, by the way, that defensive rebounds you do steal them from teammates.
Yeah, exactly.
Offensive rebounds, you don't necessarily do it as much. So there's a different value put on defensive rebounding versus offensive rebounding. But
I think there's enough situations where you can kind of see as you're going to grab a rebound if anyone else is actually like an opposing player is near you or not. Like you're probably not messing around. But if it's just you and a teammate, then you can hog accordingly if that's your thing.
But I could see like a center fielder calling you off. Like if it's a great center fielder. Like the center fielder's like, I mean, this is, and the center fielder is supposed to have the right of way, right?
Yeah. And there's, quite frankly, there's times where that makes a lot of sense too, just from a team perspective. Like, if you were to ask a manager, I would rather have my center fielder catch the ball if it's a close play.
Yeah. And on the infield, if you're a third baseman going to your left and the shortstop's going to his right, if both of you could get the ball, it'd be better for the shortstop to get it. In terms of momentum and throwing the ball.
Yeah. I knew like playing shortstop next to Matt Chapman, for example, I knew like going to my right to field a ball in the hole wasn't as necessary. So I could actually play further up the middle because I know his range was so big, like especially to his glove side, that I could actually cheat a little bit more up the middle.
Yeah. And what does that do to your defensive metrics? It's very interesting.
Probably not great.
Yeah.
But it makes
from
the
a
team
team
better.
Exactly. That's my point.
Yeah.
So yeah, you get dinged in models, but your team looks good.
Right.
I do think that, just to kind of put a bow on a lot of this, I think these are all very interesting threads to pull on. I like how Tommy's thinking about these things and putting them out there. I'm
Agreed.
glad he was as candid as he was about some of these things. A lot of this feels like it's on the margins. That doesn't mean it doesn't matter, but I don't think it's going to completely reshape the bigger numbers that we care about. I think there are things that should be accounted for, but we're not necessarily whiffing completely as a result of not having all of this locked down perfectly at this point.
Yeah.
Wind-dated home runs, I think. I mean, since the home run is such a big event, I think wind-dated home runs would be nice to get wind in your sort of expected home runs or whatever.
The Sacramento thing is crazy. Like that.
I agree with the wind-dated. That's where I started too. Like the park factors just aren't. They're better represented than a vacuum, but they aren't representative of reality.
Yes, park factors is a big place I think we can improve.
We're probably like a 2.0 version of park factors with what StatCast currently has compared to what I think of as maybe the 1.0 version, the old indexes from the Bill James handbook from 20 years ago now.
Yeah.
I think that's an opportunity. And I keep thinking about stuff like, I brought this up with you before, Jed. Brendan Cuddy told us that left field at Yankee Stadium is weird. You were talking about the infield at Coliseum. Parks have a lot of different nuances and things that should be accounted for. So I think that's the biggest part of all this.
From what I hear, I think outs above average will have some sort of park factors in it. Now, will it have the wind down to the thing? Probably not. But I think there's been enough clamoring for how the walls and how the park plays to make this change. I mean, the biggest one that probably annoys them the most and comes up the most on social media is when somebody jumps up, robs a home run, and then the catch probability was 80%. And part of that reason is that the catch probability metric has no idea where the walls are, so it's saying that guy could have just run and grabbed the ball. And we have seen that there are different kinds of robbing, right? We've seen guys who stand by the thing and jump up a little bit and rob it, or ones where they're climbing the wall and getting it, So I think even that Denzel Clark catch probability was not 5% or something on that one where he was Spider-Manning. So, getting the wall in catch probability seems like something that's very maybe simple and would help with the optics and would help the broadcast crew understand that catch that was just so amazing had a 80% probability. That's not telling the full story. So I think some of those changes will come soon.
Well, yeah, it was an 80% probability for Denzel Clark, or was it 80% probability for the average center fielder in the major leagues too, right? There's other some contextual factors I think would be a bit helpful too. Your individual catch probability might even be more interesting in some instances for trying to measure that.
Breaking news. We've got some news coming across the ticker. Breaking news. Cubs, Marlins closing in on an Edward Cabrera deal.
Yeah. Patrick Mooney's got the report on The Athletic. We don't know anything about who would be going back to Miami at this point in time, but it appears that the Edward Cabrera sweepstakes are finally coming to a close. You're kind of one of the bigger believers in Cabrera that I know. And frankly, I think 2025 proved you right. If there's a winner and a loser on our show for how we feel about Edward Cabrera, you at least get a lowercase dub for what happened in 2025. I mean, a career high in innings, 137 2/3, single digit walk rate for the first time as a big leaguer, down to 8.3%. I didn't think it could be done. I put him in the Edinson Volquez bucket, and I'll admit this, I was wrong. Edward Cabrera improved his control more than I thought he could.
I mean, one of the reasons for optimism was that his location plus was bad, but it wasn't Joe Boylian. It was sort of a 95, 97, there's a lot of starters who live in that space. And so I always thought that there's a chance for it. The way he got there was by dropping his arm slot, I think, to find his more natural arm slot. I think he was probably trying to reach up there, you in especially in like Little League and a lot of lower level development is get that arm up there, get that higher slot, get more ride on that fastball, especially during, spin rate 1.0 was like, you need IVB. So I think, he's found a workable 4-seam, a great 2-seam that he can command better. And he always has that nasty changeup. This is the highest stuff starter that the Cubs would have. And I think that, putting him in there and having a different look between Steele and Horton, I mean, I know they're lefty righty, but they both have this cut ride fastball. I think having somebody like Edward Cabrera in there who has a totally different look would be good for them. They are a little heavy on cut ride. Porter Hodge has cut ride. I mean, there's a bunch of cut ride on that team, and I think this is exactly what they need. I think this is the kind of big swing they need to take. There's some speculation to take Owen Casey. I think that's a big price, but Owen Casey strikes out a lot. It's a nice bat speed power package. But he strikes out a lot, and it's just hard to make a lineup like that. We saw that, they had him up, there was an injury and he didn't even play. So, it's just hard to crack a lineup when it's as good as the Cubs. So I think this is a good move for them.
All right. I'm actually, I was looking at Savant while you were talking about him, and we had a listener question about Vladdy. I don't know if we're going to get to that on terms of tilt today, but I actually think this is way more significant. I mean, this guy, Edward changed his arm angle from a mid, 42, 44 degree arm angle to 36 last year. I think that's far more significant than any tilt adjustment in a hitter, because this is completely under your control, right? You're not, you're in complete control of the pitch, the arm angle, the release, everything. Hitting is way more nuanced with the pitch selection that you're actually swinging out.
Yeah. And I think just to add one more thing to the arm angle adjustment, if that is something that can keep Cabrera healthier, that's a huge part of it for him too. Yeah. Obviously the pitches are going to look and move different from the lower angle, but if he found something that keeps his elbow and shoulder healthier, and I realize he spent some time late in the year on the IL, but came back, made a couple of starts, at least ticked the box of healthy when the regular season ended, that's going to be really important for the Cubs too. He's still 3 years away from free agency. So, and not a rental at all, a guy that actually makes them better for the next 3 seasons.
And from that angle too, on the changeup, I mean, he added almost an inch and a half more tail on the changeup from that lower arm angle, which, from that angle, it's easier to get more tail. So if that's his, that is his pitch, the more lateral movement he can get on that, the more effective it's going to be, especially against lefties.
Yeah, we have that stuff from Trevor May that he found those pieces that suggested that lower arm slots are a little bit healthier that we reported on last year. So I think this is it's a strong move for the Cubs. This is, people have been waiting, people have been poking the Cubs with a stick saying do something. And I think this is a big swing.
The off season is long. January counts. So yeah, a trade now, moves now, they still matter. Just because you didn't do it right away doesn't mean you didn't do it. Keep that in mind for those resolutions too, and all those projects that you got piling up around the house, like I do. Jed hinted at this one. We got a question about Vlad Jr. in our mailbag. This one came from Kyle Baseball Juice in the Discord. Vladdy's recent playoff performance got me wondering if there was a swing change that could potentially stick for 2026. Looking at his swing tilt by month, August, September, and October showed a clear increase in tilt and the highest he has shown since July of 2024. Curious if anyone has any thoughts about this and if Jed has any insight on how easy or hard it is for hitters to change and preserve changes in swing path tilt. Jed, you can start with that one first since the question was addressed directly to you.
Perfect. We've talked about this before, and more research is supporting the idea that, pitch selection, the pitch you're actually swinging at, determines tilt. And so the higher the pitch is, the flatter the tilted, the lower the pitch is, the more tilt there is. And And I looked at, we had a graph. I don't know if you're going to throw it up there or not, but the tilt was higher in the later part of the year, but not outside. I mean, if you go back to 2024 in June and July, he's at a 30-degree tilt. So I don't think it's statistically significant enough to just say that maybe in the months that he had a higher tilt, he was just getting pitched lower in the zone more. And so it led to his swing appearing to be a higher tilt.
Yeah, I mean, this is the chart that you referenced. I color coded it because there's a lot of information on there, and I just want you to see how much dark green there is in the bottom. And the four things that I looked at were bat speed, tilt, intercept point, and stance. And what I colored green was if the bat speed was higher, the tilt was higher, the intercept was further out in front, and the stance was more open. And what you can see is, and these all continued into the postseason when he swung the hardest he'd ever swung, 78.3 miles per hour in the postseason. He had a 27-degree tilt. So it would be all just as dark green at the bottom there if you include the postseason. And basically what this story tells you is that I think his intent changed over the course of the season last year, and he was swinging harder than ever. He did, I think, swing at pitches that were slightly lower. So instead of just looking for up tall, like he wasn't getting those pitches at all. So he started looking sort of like middle in and out. And that allowed him to, even with a 27, 28-degree tilt, not the most tilt of his career, but taken in some, he showed the highest combination of bat speed, tilt, getting the ball out in front with an open stance. And so I think basically he just changed his intent more than anything. I doubt that maybe with the stance open, that was something he was aware of, but like in general, I think it was, I'm here to do damage. And like, I'm going to do damage. So it was like harder swings, like, that's what I see. And I wonder, one question I have for you is, if this is his max intent, 78.3 bat speed with a little bit more tilt than usual and getting the ball out in front, 37 inches out in front of the plate. If this is his max intent, is it possible to do that all season, or does he have to kind of go in waves?
No, I think especially as you age, you're gonna do it in waves. I mean, and it's not that you're trying to do it in waves. It's just that over the course of the season, there's going to be times where you're not feeling 100%. You're not going to be swinging. Like you could go up there with the intent of swinging as hard as you can, and you're just not going to have the output that you would through the course of the season. Like there's just going to be ups and downs in the way your body feels. And that has nothing to do with intent. And I'll still make the argument, like, you're talking about a higher tilt, even at 30 degrees, which is the highest. That's really like, that's still below. Yeah, that's still flat. And I still, like I said, I still believe that within a 2 or 3 degree, band, a lot of that is just going to be decision making. Like which pitches are you choosing to swing at? And so I just don't find this, I don't find this significant at all, other than he, maybe was swinging a little bit harder in the postseason because he was trying to do more damage, or his body felt better, right? Like maybe he was pacing himself. You hear a lot, like, to bring it back to the NBA, you hear a lot about the closers, like the big time players kind of saving it for the fourth quarter, right? Maybe this is Vladdy getting to the point in his career where he kind of understands the arc of the season, and the middle part of the season, he was like, all right, I'm still going to do my damage, but I'm not going to blow myself out in June and July. So I'm ready for August, September, and October.
That was another question that was in the Discord that I didn't put on the rundown because it came up, I think, I don't know, in the last like 12 or 24 hours or so. But there is a process to learning how to keep yourself healthy for major league seasons, right? I mean, A, they're longer than any other season that you ever play. And B, like you're in a position with more travel, different resources too, where you just have to figure some things out. Yeah, you have help. You have people there that are trying to give you some of the information, some of the answers. but some of that's just experience, isn't it? And just understanding what you need to feel good late in the year for a season that runs so long.
Well said. I've got no notes.
All right, good. We can move on. We got another question here from BitCloud, and it's about zone contact versus terrible chase contact numbers. The question is, what do we make of a player who has a good zone contact percentage and a terrible chase contact percentage? Marcelo Mayer is an extreme example of this last year. I'll throw this one to you first.
Yeah, because I do want to hear what Jed has to say on this, because I found it fascinating. There are players like this. So if we want to talk about a player who does this often, Jeremy Pena is somebody who does this often. He is really good at making contact in the zone, and he's really bad at making contact out of the zone. And I think just generally for him, his career has gotten better as he's swung a little bit less outside the zone. He's like understood the zone better because he's just so much better. I don't know what it is about a swing that is that way, but if you do a list of guys who have this differential, like he's on the list multiple times. But when I first did it, I was looking at, who has these big difference, and he has Marcelo Mayer last year had the third biggest difference in zone and outside zone contact. So just making contact inside the strike zone, outside the contact. So the third biggest difference in 884 player seasons since 2021 of 26 and under guys with 100 plate appearances. So third biggest, this is a really, really big outlier. And if you look at the biggest outliers along with them, it sounds like a terrible place to be, because the other big differential guys like him are Michael Toglia, Everson Pereira, Riley Adams, Tyler Locklear, Taylor Trammell, Colby Thomas, Jack Sawinski, Nelson Velasquez. There isn't a major league regular in the group right now. And so you'd say, oh, well, that's not great. But a lot of those guys were terrible inside the zone and really bad outside the zone, right? Think about them. Toglia, Pereira, there's a lot of swing and miss here. Mayer made contact inside the zone. If you limit it to guys who made contact inside the zone, the comps change. You get better names. You get Evan Carter, Spencer Torkelson shows up a couple times, Jeremy Pena, like I mentioned, Noelvi Marte. You get major league regulars. And here, I added bat speed because he also swings the bat really hard. So he has some power. So here are the comps. If you just use decent zone contact, terrible outside of zone contact, and bat speed, and what you are is Harris Montero, that's the bad one. Then you get Noelvi Marte, Spencer Torkelson, and Jeremy Pena. So you can see why, just in the life of Spencer Torkelson and Jeremy Pena, they've had bad seasons, they had good seasons. They haven't, part of it has been growth and getting there. But Marcelo Mayer had a 33% outside of zone contact. The major league average was 56. So my general feeling is that that's the number that's going to regress. He's going to make a little bit more contact outside the zone next year. His strikeout rate will go down. He'll make his power shown through his great bat speed. I'm upbeat about Marcelo Mayer, despite all the comps being terrible. But if I throw it to you, Jed, somehow it would be like, what? I mean, you were always about zone, commanding the zone, and just not trying to swing at stuff outside the zone. But is there a mechanical reason you could see somebody just being pretty good in the zone and terrible outside the zone? Or
okay, so that was a perfect segue, because I did want to actually talk a little bit about my approach and looking at Marcelo. First of all, I want to say, he's 23 years old. We're talking about 510 pitches and 136 plate appearances. Mm-hmm. So just to keep that in context. I look at, I'm not looking so much at the Z swing and the O swing, and those contacts. I think they're significant, but only in context of I'm looking at his chase rate, and I will actually say I prefer a lower ozone contact. we don't want to be making a ton of contact out of the zone. And if I look at my career and I look at my chase contact, I had to make it's a gift and a curse. Like hand-eye coordination is a gift and a curse. If you go back and you look at my chase contact, I was very high, 75, 71, 65, 63, 75. The last couple years in my career, though, like, in the years that I was really good, I was in the
it ages terribly.
and my chase contact last 2 years were in the like 53 and 56%. So I made a conscious effort to actually like try not to go out of the zone on my swings, because I think early in my career, I wanted to make contact out. Like I was trying to find barrels, right? I was just trying to put the barrel on the ball. The thing that pops out to me, so his chase, I don't mind that his chase contact is actually relatively low. The thing that pops out to me is his meatball swinging percentage. He was at 70.9% versus a league average of 76. And that just screams to me that he is too passive. He's letting way too many pitches. And I'm glad you said this. Like my approach was, don't go out of the zone. Well, my meatball swing percentage from 2015 to 2022 was never below 82%. 81.3 was the lowest. I'll actually say I only saw 36 pitches apparently in 2000. Yeah, in 2019, I had 100% meatball swing. So my point is like he's at 70.9% meatball swing. This is a guy, you have 74% or 74 mile an hour bat speed, which is, far above average. And you have a meatball swing of 70%, which is 6% below average. This screams to me that this kid needs to be more aggressive, and he needs to be more aggressive because he's basically, he's not making contact out of the zone, but he's also not swinging at pitches that he should be driving very clearly. So I love the fact that he's not making contact out of the zone. I would rather him take a big swing and miss out of the zone than take an 80% swing and make contact out of the zone. But I need him to be more aggressive in the zone. Like to me, a 70% meatball swing percentage is not enough. You need to be more aggressive in the zone. You see a pitch that is ready or that you can drive, you got to let this thing go. You got to be more aggressive. You got to be more decisive.
Yeah, I think you've got it. I mean, a couple of things stand out just to stack on to what you're saying is that he had a 71% first strike percentage. League average is 62%. Hey, those are strikes you should be swinging at. Some of those are your meatballs, right? Some of them are the first pitch. And then we have this other chart, which is his rolling zone swing and O swing. And I think early on he was maybe too aggressive. I mean, you're saying here's a guy who's swinging at 40% of pitches he sees outside the zone and not making contact with any of them. That's not great.
No.
But when you see him drop the O swing, he also dropped his zone swing. So he basically just became passive.
Exactly.
After 20 games, he just changed his approach and became passive. But what I like about this is you see 2 or 3 different versions of Marcelo Mayer, and even in the small sample in one season, which is the first one that was super aggressive, the second one that was super passive, and then hopefully the third one, which is a chase rate around 30%, but a zone swing above 70%. That was where he was at the end of the season. And I'm sorry that like sort of injury, changed the shape of his season, but I see at least 3. I think there's 3 different versions of Marcelo Mayer, and that third one, could be an exciting one. And we can't forget the pedigree, what people thought of him before that. This is the perfect time to buy on Marcelo Mayer,
and very very indicative of a young player trying to figure out who he is at the major league level and which pitches he can handle. And I'll just reiterate, like knowing, like, it takes time, but knowing the pitches you can handle in the zone. And when you get them, there cannot be passiveness. You cannot be a successful major league hitter being passive.
Yeah, I think circling something like that meatball percentage and just seeing where it is after a full season in the big leagues, I think it'll mean a lot more to me after 2026. Right now, it's a great, like, hey, let's keep an eye on this and make sure he's making that adjustment because he's so young. These were his first 44 games in the big leagues. I think I'm comfortable giving him a little bit of a pass for that as part of the learning process, given plate skills we've seen before. Other complicating factor with Marcelo Mayer, going back to his minor league numbers, he had some injuries in the minors too that might have hidden some of the power that he actually has. So I'm all in on the
his ISOs are higher than his home run totals. Yeah, he has there's good isolated slugging. Like he was good. And if you think about his comps back to the comps, I mean, Noel Marte, Spencer Torkelson, Jeremy Pena in particular, they had struggles. They didn't, I mean, Pena, I don't know. He's a very unique shape
Pena's
of
had some
career.
injuries too, also like that would.
But like that whole like World Series MVP, but then like being taking a step back and then taking a step forward. But like the nice thing is that Mayer has defensive value. So where Torkelson and Montero might be the names where you say, like what if he is a Torkelson? Well, if you had a Torkelson who could play shortstop or second or third, which Mayer can, you'll take that, and he'll stay on the field more and he won't end up in the minors and they'll play him because right now they don't have a second or third baseman. That's another reason you buy Mayer, because this year, even if they sign Bregman, even if, there's still a spot waiting for him. You know what I mean? I think he's, very worst. He's a super utility guy for them this year.
Yeah. But I'm in. I think there's a lot there to like. Good hard hit rates, just overall, I think an approach that will eventually work. Depth chart also working in his favor. One last topic on our way out the door today. I did not know this until producer Brian mentioned it. Today is National Bobblehead Day, and bobbleheads are great. The question Brian threw at us was actually a Jed question. Jed, do you have a favorite bobblehead, either of yourself or one that you have obtained over the years?
Yeah. I'm still waiting for my major league bobblehead. I don't know if they still make them if they make them when you're retired, but I'll throw this at the A's, hey guys,
I'll come to Sacto if you guys make me a bobblehead. I love Seinfeld, and I've got a collection of the Costanza bobbleheads. Is he riding a whale?
These are good.
The marine biologist.
Yeah, the marine biologist
one,
gem.
Yeah, and then you got, what is it? The assistant to the assistant traveling secretary.
Yeah, he's teaching Jeter. Is it Jeter and Bernie Williams? He's showing them how to hit.
Exactly. And then taking a nap under his desk.
Yep. He's got the secret cubby that the contractor built for him under the desk. And then Steinbrenner thinks there's a bomb in the office. They got to bring in the robot for that. Yep. And you get the puffy coat. The puffy coat Costanza. That's a pretty good collection of Costanza bobbles.
Yeah, those are good. Where are they? Were those like mostly Mets?
Yankees and Mets, yeah, and then I got a few more too. I like the I like the Otani. I found the Otani one, Kenobi, and him and Decoy.
Oh, that's a lightsaber.
He's got a decoy with
which
him.
Come on, guys, my name is Jed, right? My player's weekend jersey was Jedi. This isn't hard.
Yeah.
And then the iconic Griffey 95 slide. And then I got my two minor league ones there, which actually the Wilmington Blue Rock one was kind of cool. If you look at the box on the side there, they gave two bobbleheads away for the Blue Rocks, and it was Jed Lowry and Joe Biden. At the time of Senator Joe Biden.
Wow.
So it was a random pull that day at the ballpark.
I don't know if it was random. I think that was just like the lineup. It was like one day was me, one day was Joe Biden.
That's fun. I would just love to know, like at the park that day, were people trading like 3 Bidens for 1 Jed? Like, what was the if they were on the same day? But you're right.
I don't know. I would. I'm guessing.
Season.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
My kids
you got one.
My kids have all the Padres ones, but this is my favorite.
Is that MC Hammer?
There, yes. Former Oakland A's bat boy.
And it's like a spinning bobble.
Oh, he dances. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's my favorite.
That's nice. Oakland giveaway.
Yeah, that's an Oakland giveaway.
Oakland giveaway. Nice. I've got one that's usually in my background, which is still being built. I'm going to try not to mess it up. Anybody remember who that player is?
I mean, it's not Jeffrey Hammonds.
Gary
Not
Sheffield.
Jeffrey
Oh, wait,
Hammonds.
no, with the pink bat.
Bill Hall.
Bill
Yeah, it's
Hall.
Bill
I
Hall.
love
bat.
Bill Hall. My former teammate Bill Hall. He's the best. I love
Bill
it.
Hall, man.
The pink
He's
bat was the big clue.
kind of an underrated part of some of those like mid turn of the century Brewers teams. Like 2006 was the year that he hit the home run on Mother's Day with the pink bat. I think the following season they did Bill Hall bobblehead day, and they weren't all pink bats. I got lucky. I happened to pull
Oh, really?
one of the boxes that had the pink
Limited
bat.
edition.
Yeah, it was cool because that home run, that was the day I graduated college, actually. So we were all just back in my apartment, just hanging out after walking across the stage, and he hit that walk-off. So,
Dude,
Good
he
day.
is a candidate for one shining season. He had a 5-win, 35 homer season in 2006. His best other season was the year before, 3-win, and then no other season of average by WAR.
yeah, it didn't age
Was
well.
it injury?
I don't remember injuries off the top of my head, but that would be worth further exploration.
Interesting.
But definitely a famous brewer, I think, at the very least. So glad I got that bobblehead to commemorate that. But good call by producer Brian to acknowledge that today is National Bobblehead Day, January 7th. Put that on your calendar for future years. Earn. I don't know. Pick up another bobble every year in January. Make a tradition out of it.
I gotta have one for next year.
All right, you already got one for next year. I'm gonna open more boxes between now and next year.
Man, I really blew it. I used all of them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
collect the whole collection in year
This
one.
is easily my favorite. I don't have that many other ones.
We are going to go on our way out the door. A reminder, you can join our Discord, drop us a nice rating and review wherever you enjoy this podcast. That is going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Friday.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.